Hello dear children, and welcome to another session on Ways with Words. Today we'll start with the romantic poet John Keats. We discussed or we studied Sonnet 29 by William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare belongs to the Elizabethan era, and we also studied A Roadside Stand by Robert Frost, and Frost is an American poet and is considered as the Wordsworth of America, and it is taken from an anthology of poems. And what is the anthology? A Further Range. All right, so these are the important poems that we covered in the last few classes. Let's begin. Ode to Autumn. All right. Now, John Keats was born in 1791 to Thomas Keats and Frances Keats. His father was a stable keeper, that is, he managed the livery stables of his father-in-law in Moorsfield, and it is in fact, his life is in fact a tragedy. Tuberculosis ran in the family, that is from the mother's side, and his father died due to an accident. He fell down from the horse and he injured himself, and he died in 1805. When Keats was just 8 years old. So he lost his father when he was just 8 years old, and that was a shock to the family. And later, in 1810, he also lost his mother when he was 14 years old, and she died due to tuberculosis. He and his three siblings, Keats was the eldest, then George, Tom and Fanny. Now again, Fanny, when I say Fanny, you shouldn't get confused with Keats's lover, who is Fanny Brown, and Fanny Keats, who's his sister. Fanny here, there are two Fannys involved in his life. One is Fanny, his sister, and the other one is Fanny Brown, his lover. So he and his three siblings were brought up by his uncle, Richard Abbey, and they were very close. That is, his siblings, he and his siblings were very close. They had a close-knit relationship. He attended the Clark School in Enfield, and he took up medicine, or he was an apprentice under Dr. Hammond, but realizing that poetry was his passion, he gave up his apprenticeship to become a doctor, and he turned to poetry in 1861. He realized that his vocation was poetry, or he wanted to be a full-time poet. His first poem was O Solitude, and this was published with the help of his friend Leigh Hunt. Abu Ben Adam, you remember Abu Ben Adam? Yeah, Leigh Hunt's Abu Ben Adam and A Plate of Gold by Leigh Hunt. They are very famous examples, or very famous poems by Leigh Hunt. So Leigh Hunt was his friend, Keats' friend, and with his help he wrote O Solitude, and this was published in the journal Examiner. And then he wrote, he was very much interested in Greek classical works. His the next major poem that he wrote was on looking into Chapman's Homer in 1816. George Chapman. He had written a translation of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Keats read this translation by George Chapman, and he writes his poem, a major poem on looking into Chapman's Homer in 1816. The next poem, that is his long poem, Endymion, which begins with the famous line, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever," is one of his major poems. But this was also a poem that gave him a lot of bitter, or he was bitterly attacked by the critics of the day. Now we shall be discussing as to why they attacked him. It was not his fault, or it was not anything to do with this beautiful poem. It was only because Keats's writing, as well as Leigh Hunt and also Hazlitt and all, their writings were far beyond or far advanced than the age of, or than their age, that contemporary period. And therefore these conservative people, these conservative poets, they could not acknowledge and appreciate the language, and therefore they felt that the poem that was written, Endymion, the language that was used by Keats and all, as they bitterly criticized Keats. Now it was political as well as literary rivalry as well as political rivalry. There was literary as well as political rivalry, because Leigh Hunt, Keats as well as Hazlitt, they all came from the labor class background or the working class background, and the conservatives, they were not able to withstand, or they bitterly criticized them because they were not from the upper class. One. Another thing, they did not attend colleges, important colleges like Eton and Oxbridge, or those colleges, important colleges or big famous colleges, and therefore they made fun of them, and several reviews were published making fun of Keats's Endymion. Was published in Blackwood magazine as well as Quarterly. These two magazines attacked Keats bitterly. In fact, this is also responsible. It's very important, because this attack, Keats never could come out of this attack, or never recovered from this attack, and this was one reason that aggrieved his untimely, or led to his untimely death. Keats met his lover Fanny Brown for the first time in August in 1818. Now there was another lover. He loved Isabella, but then when he went to Isabella's house, he fell in love with Fanny Brown, who was who was Isabella's neighbor. So there he falls head over heels for Fanny Brown, and this year, that is 1818, was in fact one of the most important, not 1818, 1819 is considered one of the most important or memorable year of Keats. It is the annus mirabilis of Keats's career. Annus mirabilis means the most memorable year of Keats's career. Now Keats is greatly or widely known for his odes. He has written 6 odes, and also he has written various poems. You have the Eve of Saint Agnes, you have Eve of Saint Mark, La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, which you will be studying in the next semester. He also wrote Lamia 1 and 2. His sonnets are also very, very popular and very famous. He has written both Petrarchan as well as Shakespearean sonnets. Now, his odes. Now, I am going to tell you, or I would like to tell you about his odes, his 6 odes, before we move on to Ode to Autumn, because they are all very important. In the sense, you will get to understand his nature, his style of writing only if you have an understanding of his odes. So, his 6 odes, they were written in 1819. As I told you, a year that showed his poetic development and productivity. It was ode on, the odes are ode on indolence, ode on a Grecian urn, ode to Psyche, ode to Nightingale, ode to autumn, and ode to melancholy. Now, there is no clear order in which they were written. Some were considered earlier odes and some were considered later odes. Definitely, Ode to Autumn is considered a later ode. He has also, as I told you, written sonnets, and like for instance, Fame and Why Did I Laugh Tonight? They are all very famous sonnets. In fact, they rank the best in English, and as I told you, he has written, or he has used both Petrarchan style of writing as well as Shakespearean sonnet. He has written both Petrarchan sonnet as well as Shakespearean sonnet. But the later half of this 1819 was not a very happy one. The first half was happy, but the later half of 1819, or the second half of 1819, it was a very unhappy period for Keats, because one thing he lost, or he was not able, it's his unrequited love, because he was suffering from tuberculosis. He came to know that it runs in the family and there is no escape from it. And another thing, he was not able to marry Fanny Brown because of financial difficulties. So it is this time that he wrote his tragedies also. Otho the Great, which was written in collaboration with Charles Brown. He also wrote Lamia and The Fall of Hyperion. They were all written during this period. So 1819, the second half of 1819, Lamia, The Fall of Hyperion, Otho the Great. They were written during this period. Okay. And as I told you, the later half was not a very happy one. He soon realized that his fate would be no different than that of his, or from his mother. It is also said that, it is not said, he nursed, his brother fell ill and he was suffering from tuberculosis. His brother Tom, he suffered from tuberculosis, and the same disease that killed his mother. And it is said so that Keats looked after, nursed his brother. He exposed himself to this contagious disease, and soon he also was affected by this disease. And therefore, he had to leave because the conditions in London, or the climate in England was not suitable for this disease, and he had to move to a warmer place in search of better health. He thought that he would recover, and therefore he bids a farewell, a tearful farewell to Fanny Brown, and he moved to a warmer climate in Rome. But he never came back. He was nursed by his friend, and I would like you to look at this painting also by Joseph Severin. Joseph Severin painted this picture when they were in Rome, when just before Keats died in Rome. And this picture was, painting was of Keats was painted by Joseph Severin, his friend. And thus he also he has told, or he told his friend, that he was nursed by of course the Leigh Hunt's family, as well as Fanny Brown and his mother also, for some time, and then they moved to Rome during the initial stages, that is, and then they moved to Rome, where he died there. He also asked his friend that to engrave the phrase on his tombstone, and that was, "Here lies the man who writ his name in water," because Keats's poems were never recognized during his lifetime. It was only after his death, after years after his death, that his poems were recognized and appreciated. Okay, so they are the these are the important things that you ought to know about Keats. He died in Rome in February 1821. He died very young. He was only 26 when he died, and 1 year after, Shelley, his friend Shelley, also died. His friend Shelley, I wouldn't say his friend Shelley, because Keats always maintained a distance from Shelley, because Shelley was a senior poet and Shelley was a domineering character. So Keats always tried to maintain a distance from Shelley, but Shelley was very much, he liked Keats a lot. Let's look at the odes one by one, and then we will get to the poem. Now, the great odes of Keats, let's first start. They were all written, I told you, 1819. It was the most productive year of Keats. He wrote a lot of poems during that time. It shows his poetic productivity as well as creativity, and it can be considered as the annus mirabilis of his time, of his career, the memorable year of his career. So, Ode to Psyche was an important poem, because there was a departure from Keats's early style of writing. His early poems describe an escape from an escape into the pleasant realms of one's imagination. It was like an escape. He wanted to escape. Like, for example, in the Ode to a Nightingale, it is like an escape to another world, and with the help of imagination, he would just escape into another world and would not think about the weary reality. So this is one example for negative capability. Now, what is negative capability? Keats coined this term, negative capability. Negative capability means it's an ability or a capability. You will be studying, the English students will be studying it in detail next semester, next year, that is. But just to tell you what negative capability is, negative capability means you are not going to question a lot of things. For example, Jurassic Park. Okay, you know that they are not true, but still you relish it, you like it, right? You enjoy the movie. Anaconda, you enjoy that movie. Star Wars, you enjoy the movie. Infinity Wars, the Avengers, you enjoy it, but you don't question it. Captain America, Marvel classics, Marvel comics, you don't question any of these things, though you know that they lack logic. You relish it, you accept it, and that is because of your ability or your negative capability. It's not a negative term. Negative capability means you are allowing imagination to take over than allowing the reason or logic to take over. You don't say, how can this happen in Avengers? You are in the middle of the movie, you stand up, what type of movie is this? How can this happen? It is nonsense. How can Captain America do all these things? Or how can Hulk, how can this man turn into a Hulk? Right? Where is Thor? Right? All those, you have Greek mythology, everything involved, everything together in a different form in the Avengers, but you don't question them. You enjoy them. Likewise, J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter. The Hogwarts Express comes from nowhere. A bus that becomes thinner and it can go through any small, even an area of a building. A lift that would go to a different a section of the magical world, a magical world as such. You don't question them. That is because of negative capability. Another term that was coined by somewhat similar to this is willing suspension of disbelief by S.T. Coleridge. S.T. Coleridge, you have studied that. You have studied poems by S.T. Coleridge in your 9th standard or your 10th standard. Ancient Mariner, water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. Yes. So Ancient Mariner, willing suspension of disbelief. So what are you doing? You are willingly suspending your disbelief. What is disbelief? What do you mean by disbelief? Disbelief. What is belief? You believe things which are true. You believe things which are logical, which have facts. Fact ഉള്ളത് ലോജിക്കൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ട്രൂത്ത് ആയിട്ടുള്ളത് അതാണ് നമ്മൾ വിശ്വസിക്കുക, ബിലീവ് ചെയ്യുക. Whereas you are in an imagination, you are willingly, purposefully, knowingly suspending your disbelief. Why you disbelieve something? You disbelieve something when it is not true, right? So what do you mean by disbelieving something? Disbelieving means, no, I can't believe it, I cannot believe it. That means I want logic, I want truth. So what you are doing is, you are saying, no, at this moment I am willingly going to suspend my disbelief. I am not going to question. I am not going to go after fact. I am not going to go after reason. I will believe what the writer has written. I will believe in imagination. I will believe my blood, not my brain. Sometimes you have to believe in your blood and not your brain. You can't simply go after facts, especially the commerce students. The commerce students will be having this. I'm not going against you. I'm just telling you, when you're studying fact, you might have this, concept of how can this happen? How can the witches come out from nowhere? In Macbeth, you will find witches from nowhere. Likewise, Bahubali. Bahubali jumps from from the field, from the war field. He jumps from there to that big tower over there, right? How come it happens? Now, if the writer, the script writer, did not have negative capability, then he would have sat and thought, oh my God, I will not write this because the audience will not believe it. Because why? Then he thinks about fact. That is not logical. It will not happen. So the writer here has to willingly suspend his disbelief. The writer has to stop thinking like that. He has to stop going after the fact, and he has to write in such a way that the superhero character of the hero is brought out. And the author also relishes it, he is happy with it, the audience is also happy with it. Though we know that a human being cannot jump like that, we are ready to accept Bahubali's superpower. Right? We are ready to accept it. Why? That is because of our negative capability. Now this concept was spoken by whom? By John Keats. Now Keats is not a critic, okay? He is not a critic. He has written this concept, all these ideas and concepts to his brothers in a letter. Keats is famous for his letters. He is not a critic, remember that, okay? He is not a critic. When you come to criticism theories and all, don't think that Keats is a critic. Keats is just a poet. Keats was not a critic. He has written all these concepts. His thoughts and concepts were written in his letters to his siblings as well as his friends. So you can't call him a critic like S.T. Coleridge is a critic. Wordsworth is also a critic, partly a critic as well as a poet, but Keats is not a critic. All right. Okay. So in Ode to a Nightingale, in the poem Ode to a Nightingale, this thing, that is the nightingale flies high in the sky, and it is devoid of all pain. It's as though it has, it is soaring into the world of imagination, the wings of poesy. So here there is no direct involvement of the poet with the nightingale. The nightingale is let loose. The poet believes the poet does not question anything, does not go after logic. And not only that, you will not find any traces of Keats in the nightingale also. He gives nightingale its own ability to express itself. Okay, the subjective or the beliefs and the ideas and the thoughts of the poet is not present in the nightingale. The nightingale is separate. The nightingale has its own mind, and the nightingale can sing and move, and it is free. It is a free bird, and Keats does not put his ideas and thoughts in the nightingale. So it's called to be in uncertainties, to be in mysteries, okay, and not going after facts or reasons. Or a poet does not give you any answers to any solution, any answers to the problems that why does this happen, how does this happen. The poet does not answer anything. We just have to enjoy it, and we enjoy it also. That is called negative capability. Okay, you will be studying that in detail in the classes that you come, the BA English students, that is. When you start studying your literary criticism, that's why we said it's all to do with the intellectual areas, the literary criticism and all. When you start studying that, you will understand these concepts better. Okay, so in Ode to Psyche, Keats' interpretation is different. Keats' interpretation gives a different, it's different from that of Ode to a Nightingale. Psyche is, who is Psyche? Psyche is a Greek, it's a Greek myth, okay, and Psyche is she's not a goddess or anything, she is a human being, a mortal or a human who is the lover of god Cupid. Cupid is a Greek god of love, and Cupid's lover is Psyche. Okay, and Cupid's lover is Psyche is a human girl. So here Ode to Psyche is Keats' interpretation of the myth of Cupid and Psyche. It's Keats' perspective, Keats' interpretation. So that is different from different from that of Keats' earlier poems like that you find in Ode to a Nightingale. So it's more subjective. Ode to Psyche is more subjective. It's his interpretation. Then you have Ode on a Grecian urn. Ode on a Grecian urn, he describes a storied urn. An urn, what is an urn? Where ashes are kept. The burnt ashes of the dead person are kept. So Keats describes a Grecian urn, a storied urn, and there are carvings in the urn. There are paintings or carvings on it, and these carvings it depicts few pictures, and one is that of a piper he is eternally piping. He's piping forever. It's a picture, and he is piping, and therefore in the picture he will remain always piping, and he's piping to pursue his beloved. He's attracting his beloved, and forever and ever eternally he will go on piping, and he will go on pursuing his beloved. And also there is no fulfillment. This piper, he will never, or the shepherd, he will never fulfill his love. He will never get it fulfilled, because he is not a human. He is a painting. He's carved onto the urn, and therefore there is no fulfillment. And he is depicted as art. There is another picture also in that, and that is that of a villager taking a heifer or a calf, a calf, to perform a sacrifice. So if all the villagers are going to attend the sacrifice, then the village must be deserted. It will remain deserted forever, eternally. And also this calf is only going to be taken, and it's not going to be sacrificed. So this calf will not, is always on the verge of life and death, and it will remain like that. And so Keats, he saw this Grecian urn in a museum, and he was musing over it, and thus he wrote this poem, Ode on a Grecian urn. And this technique, there is a technique used here, like for instance, see, poem, he's writing a poem, right? And what is he writing about? He's writing about art or a painting, sculpting, അതേപോലെ തന്നെ അതിൻ്റെ ആ പെയിൻറ്റിങ്ങും കൂടിയാണ്. അപ്പോൾ and one art is describing another art. Which art? Poetry is an art. It is describing another art, and this kind of technique is known as ekphrasis. Ekphrasis means a description of one art in another. A work of art about another work of art in a different medium. Now, poetry is a different medium. You are writing poetry. It's a different medium, right? Whereas painting is another medium. The medium used is different. So, one work of art is speaking or describing another work of art of a different medium. This technique is referred to as ekphrasis. Okay. Another one, another ode is Ode on Indolence. Now, Ode on Indolence is again a break from his classical, or from the structure of classical form. He was very much into classical form, but he was a romantic poet, remember. He was into classical means his writing, some of his classical, the structure that he wrote was classical form. He was of course, though he belonged to the romantic period, the period very much earlier to it was the neoclassical period, and the structure that he used was the classical form. But then again, it was a break from that structural form, and the poem is about a moment spent in idleness, laziness. And there are three figures presented: ambition, love, and poetry or poesy. These three are personified. They are given human-like features. And he realizes that he cannot have all the three of them together in his life. That is, he cannot have ambition and love and poetry all together, or the art of writing poetry or poesy all together. All right. So that's Ode on Indolence. Another one is Ode on Melancholy. Ode on Melancholy is a poem that is like how to cope with sorrow, or how to cope with depression or sadness. Here also he has used personification. This is the poem, a poem where the poet does not appear anywhere. In the other poems and all, there is a poet, the narrator or the poet is watching, but here in this poem, the poet does not appear at all. There is no, you will not be able to find the poet anywhere here. So, in the other poems, the most of other poems, you will find Keats, or you will find the poet appears. But here in this poem, that is Ode on Melancholy, it's how to cope with depression or sadness, and the poet does not. That's one peculiarity of this poem. And then you have Ode to a Nightingale. I told you about Ode to a Nightingale. The poem presents a conflict between reality and romantic ideal of unifying with nature, and I told you that this is based on his idea of negative capability. Then we come to our poem To Autumn. This ode is the one that is prescribed for your course of study. Like other odes, this ode shows Keats paying homage, respect to a particular goddess. Here the goddess is the deified season of autumn. Autumn is described like a goddess. Okay, so we'll stop here. I have given you a gist of what his odes, all his 6 odes. Remember, Keats is famous for his odes, especially these 6 odes which were written during 1819, the period 1819. The order in which it is written doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. You have to just remember that Ode to Autumn comes in the later, or is a later ode. Okay, we can classify it as earlier ode and later ode. Ode to Autumn comes as a later ode. Okay, we shall discuss the poem in detail from the next class onwards. So, thank you and keep safe.